Okay. Well, welcome everyone to the Colored Pencil Message in a Bottle. It's sponsored by Feasterville Library this evening. My name is Anita Thompson of Art Venture Workshops, and I'm so happy to be here with you this evening. So I put in the chat that we're going to be using 6 colored pencils. Real quickly, it's brown, orange, golden yellow, light blue or sky blue, and regular blue, and then black. But we're going to start off first using our pencil. And our sheet size is about 7 by 10, and it's landscape mode, so it's long rather than up and down. Okay, so also you want to make sure that you are on speaker view so that you are able to see. I've spotlighted the video. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in a little closer now. So we're going to get started. And basically, we're going to be creating the bottle in the middle of the paper here. So going from left to right, we want to sort of have the bottle in the middle. And it's going to be pointing upward towards the top right corner of our paper. So I want to remind everyone to draw lightly because you want to draw light enough because we'll be going over everything in colored pencil. We want the colored pencil to show and not the pencil. All right, so we're going to start here sort of a little bit, maybe like 3 inches from the bottom. And we're going to start first with the curve in the sand here. So we're going to kind of do a curve in the sand. That's where our bottle is going to be sort of resting. And we can always kind of change that curve, but we want to give a little bit of placement so that we can then create the bottle. And then once we do that, we're going to create the bottom of the bottle. And it's going to move upward with the neck portion of the bottle going towards the top right corner. So we're kind of making like an outline of the bottle shape. And I'm going to make mine just a little bit bigger. So we want to make sure both sides that are curved are approximately, or I should say, are around the same areas so that your bottle doesn't look lopsided. What you can do is you can actually draw a line here at the neck of the bottle. And then when you go to create the curves, it might be more helpful for you to see how wide that you have to create the curves. Oh, Becky's coming. Oh, let's see, we got 2 people. 2 Beckys. Oops. Welcome, Becky.
Hello.
Hello. I'm going to mute you since we're recording.
Of course, thank you.
Sure. Welcome. Okay, so we just got started. And we are drawing the bottle first on 7 by 10 paper. I'm going to recopy the information in the chat so that you have it. So just take a glance in the chat. And again, this is being recorded, so you will be able to check this out later on as well. So once we have this portion of the bottle done, we're now going to come up at the top
Still coming down.
And we're gonna create
Your rainbow.
I know.
the mouth part of the bottle. So it curves kind of downward a bit, kind of like a frown. And then each side is a little bumpy. So like that. And I'm going to erase that line that you see here. Remember, this was just a line to show you that I was looking to make sure that the curved parts of the bottle were kind of even. So I'm going to erase those lines. And I'm going to make my bottle a little bit wider and a little bit further down. And so we're also now going to go towards the bottom area of the bottle and create the bottom portion that's going to look like this, right? Because it is transparent. So it's sort of an oval shape. I had to erase my bottom portion because I wanted my bottle to be a little longer. So I just erased the portion with the, in the sand. So I'm going to redraw that again. If you were wondering where that went. Okay, so now I'm going to redraw that portion in the sand because it's stuck in there. There we go. Like so. So now you should look like you have a bottle that is tilted and it is in the sand. And then we're going to start with adding the top portion, the cork, which is up here. And so for now, what we're going to do is we're going to make a shape of the cork. And then later on, what we'll do is we'll go back at the top portion of the cork and we're going to make it look a little more cork-like by erasing this top part and making it a little bit wavier. And the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to add 2 lines in the cork bottle, just so you can see that it's actually transparent. And then the last part is we're going to add a little bit of a curve here at the bottom of the cork so that it looks like it's a bit of a an oval-like shape. And I'm going to go even closer. There we go. I have to even out my line here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to start on the inside of the bottle. We're going to use a cylinder shape for the message inside. So what we're going to do is we're going to first draw the shape. So it's going to be sort of like an elongated tube. And the tube is going to go sort of inward with the outside flaring. So kind of like this. So this kind of shape. And again, you're going to draw lightly because we're going to be erasing to make it look more realistic. But that's the shape that you want with your message. It's going to look like a tube. And again, you're drawing it lightly because we're going to go back in and we're going to make the edges of the paper kind of frayed. So let's go back in now that we made that shape. And we're going to start here on the left side. So let's just lighten up our lines a little bit with our eraser. So we're just going to very lightly lighten these up because we're going to be reconstructing a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up here to the top corner and we're going to make it just a little bit higher. And then we're going to start going downward. Now I'm going to go a lot darker so you can see it on Zoom, but yours should be very light. So it's going to kind of go like this, that top part of your paper. And then you can just erase the previous lines that you drew. So now it looks like it's curved. And then we're going to make the part that is folded up and sticking out of the top. So that is going to look like this. And again, remember to keep it light. Mine is dark, so you're able to see it. So that's just kind of the piece of paper folded up in there. And then we're going to create the shape now of the rest of the bottom portion of it. So we're going to come over here and we're going to create the first edge right here. So you're going to make sure to leave room for the rest of it. So let's come back over here and we're going to come about right here and we're going to make a bump and we're going to make the part of the paper that is tied. And so we're kind of drawing a bit of a almost kind of like a rubber band, but it's really a tie, like not a tie that you wear, but like a piece of something that's tied around it. So a string, let's say it's a string. So we make it a little more lifted up here on the left and also just a little bit here on the right. So I'm just going to show this up close so you can see what I mean. So see how the bottom part curves because there's a little part underneath it and it does it on both sides. And now it looks like it's kind of like a ring or it's going around it. Oops, my camera went a little fuzzy there because I was too close. Okay, so next, after we do that, we're going to come back down, right? So here we are, and we're going to curve inward with our paper and then go out a little bit. Doesn't have to be out as much as that. So like that. And then we're going to go across and make the bottom portion a little bit scraggly. And we're going to curl it at the end there so that now it looks like it's curling around the other side. And then we're going to just add a little bit there. And then we're going to do the last part on the bottom. So we come back over here. We are now making this curled part where my finger is pointing. So we make a more scraggly end. finish it on the right. This little line is the inside of the paper that's rolled, and we have the final part of paper coming out here. And so that is also going to be rolled up. And so then here at the bottom, you make it look like that. And then we're going to add 2 more ties right across the top. Right? So we've got one here. And so this is why I mention, you know, to go light with your pencil so that you can go back and add on some other details here. Oops. So this is kind of like crossing over, right? So this is one part of the tie. And whenever we get to the end, we make a little loop so that it looks like it's wrapping around the paper. And then we have this one scraggly part that's kind of trailing off in our bottle. I'm just fixing my lines here so it's a little easier to see. And then you can fix up here and make it maybe come out a little bit, like pointy. And you've got yourself a message in a bottle. And now we're going to deal with the outside of the bottle. We're going to very lightly draw in parts on the sand, and then we're going to draw the shell that's over here. And then we're going to start with the colored pencils. So let's go back down into the sand here, right? So here's the end of our bottle. We have another kind of bump in the sand right behind it. And we have some sand here in the back and going through the bottle here behind our paper. Next, we have our shell that is toward the end of our bottle here. And so what we're going to do is right around here, we're going to create the shape that's going to look a bit like this. Oops, sorry. That kind of flipped on me. Sorry about that. So we're just making the shape like this, and we're going to draw a 3-dimensional shape from this. So it's going to sort of look like another bottle lying on its side. Again, this should be very light. The reason we're doing it this way is because we're going to make cylinders going around it to create that shell shape. And then you're going to erase the lines that no longer make sense. Okay, so we're gonna start over here. So basically, you're gonna be starting going around and you're gonna make lines that look like they are kind of bubbly, almost like it's going around a tube. And those lines will be getting smaller, or I should say, the bubbles are getting smaller until it's really small at the end. And then you're going to erase other lines that don't make sense. Now, if you want to make another type of shell, you can do that. If you want to add a starfish, you can do that. Whatever you want to do. You can add a sand dollar along with it. I've had people add some other things, so feel free to do that. But right underneath, we're going to add some lines coming from the shell so that it looks like it's laying on the sand. So again, these lines should be very light. Mine are darker just so you can see them. And then our last part is going to be right here where we added that bump of sand. We're going to add another little bump on the side. And one more here. So what I just did was I added another little bump here. And then one underneath the bottle. And then right over here, we're going to add a shape like this because it is going to be a little bit of a mound of sand. And then we're going to lighten up our drawing because we're going to get started with our colored pencils. So let me just move this a bit here. So by lightening up our drawing, what I mean is you want to take your eraser. I have one of those gray erasers, and you're just going to lighten everything up. So you're not erasing your picture, you're just lightening it up so that you are still able to see it. But we're going to recopy these lines in different colors so that it is now, it becomes a colored pencil drawing. And we are going to start first with the sand. So I'll wait, make sure everybody is finished erasing. And then for the sand colors, you're going to need that golden yellow, the brown, and your orange. So again, what you're going to need first for the sand is your golden yellow, your brown, and your orange. And we are going to start off first with our golden yellow. So we're going to come in to our sand and we're going to make it golden yellow. So we're going to start here on the left and we're going to go through the bottle. And what else we're going to do is we're also going to very lightly color in our message. So I'll say that again. We're going to use the yellow to color the sand in the bottle and also outside of the bottle. And we're also going to very lightly color in the message in the bottle. So we're coloring in the sand very lightly because we're going to be going back and we're going to be darkening up certain spots. But for now, we just want to do a very light shading of that golden yellow. Okay, so next, we are now going to lighten up our lines in the sand where they're kind of sticking out. So you want to just lightly erase some of those lines a little more if you haven't already, because we're now going to go in with our brown. So again, what I just did was some of those lines that we drew that were the bumps in the sand, I lightened those up. And now we're going to go in with our brown and we're going to very lightly go in and use brown on those bumps. So very lightly. You see that it's just replacing the pencil. So here at the bottom of the bottle, right, you're going to make the sand kind of bump up and down. And right underneath the bottle, the marks of the sand are a little darker. See, like right here. Let's not forget underneath our seashell here. And let's not forget here in the bottle a little bit too. Now you can add other bumps that I have not added. But now we're going to start shading with our brown, and we're going to shade very light. So the key with colored pencil is to shade very lightly with different colors until you get to a part that's a little darker, and then we go a little darker. So we're going to shade inside or right outside the bottle, right here. We're going to do a little bit of shading in the sand with our brown. So right here up against where there's sort of a bump over here in the sand, we're going to shade very lightly. Although it's kind of medium light. And then when we go above it, we're going to shade so light on top of the yellow. So I'm going to just show that up close so that you can see what I mean. So in the darker parts, we're going to shade like that. And then all over the sand, we're going to add a little bit of brown on top of our yellow, like that. So it's going to look a little something like this. I'm going to go over the sand. Remember, we're inside the bottle too, because that sand, you can still see it. So let's shade first. I just thought to myself, let's add a little bit of brown to some of the sand, or most of the sand. I think that will be easier for everybody. Let's add just a really light shading of brown on top of the yellow that we just did. And then we'll go back and make it darker in the appropriate spots. Okay, so right now what we're doing is we're just very lightly shading brown on top of the golden yellow sand. We're not worried right now about the message in the bottle, the paper. We'll come back to that. But right now we're just going to very lightly shade the sand with our brown, really lightly. So it should look like that. And it's not as dark yet as the one on the left, but we'll get there. And then we're going to put our brown down for a minute, and we're going to pick up our orange. And now we're going to very lightly go on top of the sand and really lightly add a little bit of orange to that. So by really lightly, again, I'm just giving it like a really quick, you can hear it, right? And you can see it. I'm kind of very lightly coloring it in so that now the three colors that we have for the sand is a golden yellow, little bit of brown, and a really light coloring of orange. And then we're going to start to get darker with all of these colors. So can you see it's just a tiny bit of orange there? But we're going to start to get a little darker with that orange first. Okay, so grab your orange. We're going to start to get a little darker in the parts of the sand that are kind of bumping out. So here we started over here with a little bit of brown. We're going to cover it in some orange and a little bit at the kind of shade in some orange. We're going inside the bottle. But when we go inside the bottle, we go a little bit lighter. All right, we're going to go, for now, we're not touching the, again, we're not touching the message yet, the message in the bottle. But we are going inside where the sand is. And we are lightly shading with orange until we get to a bump. Here's another bump. And we're going to shade that a little darker with the orange. And we're going to shade behind it with the orange. So behind the bump, we're going to shade a little bit with the orange there. And we're going to keep going. So we're going to go inside the bottle here. And we're going to shade to the right side of the paper and inside the bottle. Like this. And then outside the bottle, going right up against our seashell here. We're going to shade a little bit and we're going to make a little bit of a line there using orange and shade. So these are the shadows on the sand, right? How the sand is kind of clumpy. We're going to go over these in brown as well. But now we're going to go right underneath the seashell. And we're just very lightly going to outline it in orange right up to the bottle. We're also going to make those lines that are coming from underneath the seashell orange, and the line, or I should say all the bumps that are on up against where the bottle is. So all those kind of bumpy lines, we're going to make those orange for now. We're also going to take a second and we're going to outline our shell in the orange. So the pencil lines that we drew, we're going to make those orange. And so what you might want to do, you can make them orange and then you can slightly erase away the pencil as you're doing it. And then retrace it using the orange. So all those little curves, the bumps, you can see that it's a lot lighter now because I retraced it in the orange. I'm going to go even closer so you can see, because we're also going to start to add some lines in those curvy parts, kind of like half lines. And then we're going to shade. A little bit on the top part of the shell, like a light orange. We're also going to shade on the bottom part of the shell, like this, just real quickly, like a really light shading. With my camera up again, because now we're going to continue in the sand, and we're going to shade again using our orange right up against where the shell is kind of hanging out. We're going to shade right next to it, and we're going to make kind of shaded lines of orange coming out from the lines that we made in pencil, because there would be some shading here. And it's going to be a little bit darker right where the bottle is kind of leaning. And then we're going to shade with orange. See this part here where it's like a mound in the sand? It's like a little bit of an indent in the sand. We're going to shade there. Still using the orange. And we're also going to shade a little bit on top of this whole area using the orange. And then finally, we're going to switch to brown. So we're going to get a little darker with our brown in the sand. So I'm going to go up a little bit with my camera. So we're going to start first here on the left. And we're going to continue making this part a little darker. So we're going to just shade a little bit darker outside of our bottle. Here's our bottle. And we're going to shade right up against it, adding a little bit of brown. As a matter of fact, we're going to leave that. And we're going to put our brown down and pick up our black for a second. So when you're finished with shading that part, you're going to pick up your black. The reason being is we're going to outline our bottle before we do anything else. And our bottle is outlined in black. So we're going to start here. And you're now going to make your bottle using your black colored pencil. You know, go slow so you can trace around all the parts, all the curved parts. We're going to trace around. And for now, we're going to leave the cork alone. So we're just tracing around the neck part of the bottle and the rest of it using our black colored pencil. And we're also going to make sure that we trace around the bottom part of our bottle, the round part, bottom of the bottle, right? The flat part. And we're going to make a bit of the bottom portion of the bottle by making another line like this. See, it's halfway kind of stuck in the sand. And then we have a little bit of some lines that are kind of reflecting from the bottom of the bottle as well. And then I like to lighten up. If my pencil work is still showing, I like to kind of go back in and just erase it very lightly. And we are finally going to go into the cork part of the bottle. And so you're going to lighten up the cork with your pencil because this is where we're going to make the top portion of the cork look more cork-like. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our brown first, and we're going to make the top part here curvy. You see how it goes in and out like cork? We're going to make lines in it. So let's start to do that. So again, we're going to pick up our brown colored pencil. And we're going to start at the top here. And then we're going to go around the top part and make it kind of bumpy. Remember to go through the neck of the bottle, and then at the bottom, we're going to make kind of what looks like a cylinder, right? Now we're going to make it look like cork by adding these tiny lines like this. And then we're going to shade very lightly in on the cork, on the part of the bottle, the neck of the bottle. We're going to go lightly because it's kind of transparent. We're going to shade on the cork on the left side, a little darker on the left. And as we're getting to the round part, we shade even darker on the left side of that cylinder or the oval. So we're kind of creating a little bit of a shadow there. And then we're going to come up here and we're going to shade very lightly the whole thing at first using our brown. And then we have a bit of a shadow here that is curving on the left side. So you're going to make a line to make it look like it's curving. And then you're going to shade that a little darker. Now, before we do anything, we want to grab our golden yellow. And we're going to really quickly just lightly color over our cork with a little tinge of yellow. We're going to pick up our brown again. And we're going to shade the left side, or I'm sorry, the right side of the oval of the bottom part of the cork. And then go up the right side of the cork and make it a little bit darker. And I like to make my little lines a little bit darker in the cork. And then we're going to grab our black. Guess what? We're going to shade on the left side of the cork with a little black on top of the brown. And we're going to skip the space for now where the bottleneck part is here. And we're going to go in the bottom part where the cork is, we can see the bottom. And we're going to trace really lightly on the left side with the black and then shade that above it. We'll go back to that later. But we're now going to go back into the sand and finish off the sand with the brown. So it's getting there. So pick up your brown again. And we're going to go into the sand around the bottle for now. So we're going to start back over here at the bottom of the bottle. And we're going to shade on top of this bump a little bit darker brown. And we're going to make this part of the sand darker, kind of like outlining it a little bit with the brown. And we're going to come over here and make one more line like this that's kind of curving. So we just made another bump in the sand by doing that. And then we're going to shade next to it. And we're going to shade on top of the bumpy part, but we're going to go a little bit darker over here. We're going to now go on this part of the sand again, and right in this part where it kind of looks like a boomerang, we're going to make that a little darker because that's the shadow. And I like to add just a little bit of shading right around this area to make it look like the sand is still kind of, there's a little bit more of a bump here. And I like to add one here with the brown. So here and here. And we're moving right along here to the right. So we're going to go up against the bottle. And we're going to shade a little bit darker. And right underneath our shell. And then we're going to start creating a little bit darker for those bumps in the sand. So we take our brown and we make those lines like a little bit darker with shading, right? Like I'm kind of going over the line a little darker with shading. And then right next to each of the lines, you're gonna shade a little bit darker. Like, so you have a line and then shading, and then a line and then some shading. And it's gonna make it look like that the sand, you know, that there's kind of stuff in the sand. And then we're gonna finally go onto the shell. And we're gonna outline the curves in brown. On both sides. On top of the orange. And we're going to add some brown shading to the top. And again, the little bottom parts of each of the curves. And you can make your shell a little bit darker by going back and just kind of outlining the bottom part of the shell as it's sitting in the sand. So I just outlined like this part to make it darker so that it's kind of sitting in the sand. It looks like it's laying in the sand there. And then we're going to also add some brown in the line that's going through the bottle here in the back, and some light shading right up against our message in the bottle for now. And we're also going to come back over here, right? So this part needs some brown on top of the orange. And we're going to shade inside the bottle as well on the sand part. And this is going to take us into our rolled up piece of paper. So I'm going to start to erase some of the pencil so that we can now start to use our brown. instead of the pencil color. So you can take your eraser and lightly erase over the gray that was your pencil. And what I like to do is I like to sort of start to draw it with the brown and then erase a little more every time we create a new brown line. So let's get started first with this side, and we're going to go lightly at first. So we're going to now outline everything in brown. So again, I'm going very lightly because we're going to go back and make parts darker. So again, what we're doing is we're now retracing our paper in brown, but we are going very lightly with the lines. Because we're going to go back and make some parts darker. We're also going to be shading. So trace every line over using your brown colored pencil. Okay, so now you're going to take your brown and we're going to shade on the left side of the paper. You're going to go underneath the part that's wrapped, and you're going to shade that portion on the left side. Just a really kind of light shading. And then you're going to do the same down the right side. Again, skipping over, for now, the parts of the paper that are tied. And we're also going to go inside the part that is kind of sticking out here on this part and on this part. Okay, so we're going to start to make some dark lines. So we're going to come up here where the paper is kind of cut, and we're going to start making some kind of scraggly lines, but we make parts of it dark and then make it a little bit lighter. I'm going to go really close so you can see. We're going to come over here to where the first tie part is, and we're going to make it dark where it's curving around. And we're going to stay on this side and make it a little dark. We're going to go to the next string and make it dark on this side. Now this part, we're also going to make dark on both sides up until we get to about right here. So see how the little string is there, but we're going to make that lighter than the rest of this. Now we're going to come down here and we're going to make it dark underneath, going all the way across. Here again, the bottom where the paper is lifting up. All the way across. Here again. So basically where paper is kind of shredded and curving around, we make it dark. And the final one, right here too. And leave a little bit of a curving in of the final part of the paper right here, that line. And we're going to do our final shading on this. So we're also going to make a few more spots that are dark. So right up here, little line there. And we're going to come over here on the left side, and we're going to kind of make it a little bit dark, but shade at the same time on the edge. We're going to shade on top of our two tie parts here. Here's the first one. We're going to shade lightly. The second one, we're going to shade a little bit darker, close to where this tie is kind of going on top of it. And then this part, we shade the whole thing. And then we get into where we're shading the little part of the string that's kind of very lightly shading off into the bottle. It gets a little bit lighter here. We're going to come here on the right side and start to make that some of those lines a little bit darker on the right side. And we're going to start to add some brown lines across the top of the paper, like shaded lines. And then we're gonna do a little bit of shading right on top of this part that is frayed at the bottom. So where it's frayed, you're gonna add some shading on top. Right in this corner here, because the paper's flipping over, you're gonna shade that part. And then a little bit on top of the paper until you get to the other part that is also flipped over right there. And then because this paper is flipped over, there'd be a shadow here on this part of the paper. And then finally, in this part, it would be a little bit darker shading here on the left. Then it would get a little lighter as it went to the right. And we're going to add a little bit of shaded brown on this piece of the wrapped, the wrapped tie here. And then we're finally going to shade inside the bottle using the brown on the right side of the sand, or right side actually of the paper. We're going to shade brown and underneath it. And finally on the right, on the left side. We're going to start to add a little bit of brown into the sand, even on the outside. So just a little bit darker there. And then we're going to pick up our sky blue. So with our sky blue, we're going to first start on the sand on the outside, and we're going to add some of that blue, oops, to the darker areas where the brown is. Hold on, I got to get another one because mine just broke. Where is my sky blue? Okay, got it. Okay, so our sky blue, we're gonna go on the sand and just very lightly inside the bottle. We're gonna color on the sand using our sky blue. So just a little bit of shading on top of everything inside the bottle. So not yet on the paper, because we're going to be adding something, some more lines with that. But inside the bottle part on the sand, and then outside on the sand where it's sitting, where the bottle is kind of sitting upward on the sand. So in the shaded parts of the brown, you're going to add a little bit of this sky blue. We're really going to start to shade with the sky blue as we are going toward the finishing portion of our program. So there's a lot of blue in this. This is really what makes the bottle. So we're going to start at the bottom here, and we're going to shade in the bottom portion of the bottle where it goes around the edge of the bottle, and then also on the bottom part, shade a little bit, and then make some blue lines right next to the other lines that we created using the brown. All right, we're going to start inside the bottle. Continuing, so we're going to come right up against where the edge is here, but we're going to start making some lines to make it look like glass. So our first line is right here, and it's right below or next to the glass, and it's going to go up toward the bottleneck part. Now we're going to go to the right side, and we're going to make, using the blue, we're going to make a curved line like this at the bottom. And then we're going to color in on this side, right up against the black part of the bottle. We're going to color in a very thin curve. And then when we get to the bottleneck, we're going to skip space so that there's a portion of the bottle that is the white of the paper. And we're going to hit the bottleneck first before we continue in the rest of the bottle. So in the bottleneck part, we're going to take our blue and we're going to make a line like this on the left. And then we're going to shade right above where the bottleneck line ends. So here across. And we're now going on top of the cork. And then we're gonna shade on the right side of the bottleneck part. And then we're gonna add a little bit of shading on top of the cork. So now it looks like the bottle, right? The cork is inside the bottle. And now we're gonna start making some lines going down and curving. So we're gonna start here at the bottleneck part, and we're gonna make a line, kind of a light wavy line like this. And then we're gonna make a shaded part right here with a line underneath. So right where that curve is starting to happen for the bottleneck. And then we're gonna make shaded line here. And then we're gonna jump over here to the left. And we're gonna start making some shaded lines that are kind of right next to each other. Like that. And the lines are going to start to continue down like this and shade a little bit, making it a little thicker here on the bottom. So our lines are going to start now going on top of our message, and we're going to shade a little more on the right side. But we're going to start making some lines and curving, or lines and shading, sorry. So like here's a line, and then we shade a little bit on the paper, but I'm making my lines like skip some space on the paper. And then we add a bit of little more shading at the bottom. But we're going to start getting darker here on the right side of the bottle. So we're going to make one more curved line here. And then we're going to outline using this blue right underneath where the paper is. We're going to kind of outline that, and then we're going to shade. On this side. And then we're going to come over here on the right where we started to shade here, and we're going to make it a little bit thicker. And then we're going to come here and add a shaded line or shaded area, really. And then we're going to shade really lightly right up against the bottle. And we're going to go down the side a little bit. And I like to make it a little bit darker here. Like I'm kind of making some spots that are a little bit darker. And then you're finally going to pick up your blue. So your regular blue. So this is, we have the blue, and then we just have a little bit of black to add, and then we're done. So here's the blue. And we're going to come up here. And where we added the light blue, we're going to make it a little bit darker here using the blue on top of the light blue. And then we're going to add some shaded blue above this line. And go a little bit on top of the light blue using the dark blue here. We're going to stay on the left at first and come down here to the bottom and just make a little bit of some darker blue shading here at the bottom. And we're going to make a little bit of some shading over here that's going to go a little bit towards our bottle. So see, like that. And we have one more spot too, right above it, like that. And those two lines are going to really make it look like the bottle is round. And we have a few more spots with this blue. We're going to go up into the right underneath the bottleneck and add some blue there. We're going to add a line of blue on the right side here. We're going to go right on top of that light blue and add a line of the blue here and here where the bottleneck is happening. And then we're going to be making some curved shaded lines going kind of in a diagonal way, coming from this shaded line with a little bit of the blue added on top of the light blue. So here's that light blue we did before. We're adding a little bit of the dark blue. And then we're going to add some shaded kind of lines that are diagonal right near it. And then we're going to shade with this blue along the edge of where the black is on this side of the bottle. And then you're finally going to take your black. I'm just going to add a few things. We're going to go to the top of the bottle and we're going to add a little bit of some black shading here and here. On the bottleneck part, or not the bottleneck part, the part going across. And we're going to make this black line coming from the left. We're going to go underneath the bottle and make the line there a little bit darker. We're going to add a black kind of shaded line here. And then staying on the left side, one here. So kind of right along this edge where we made that line, we're just going to add a little bit of some black shading. And then if you want, you can outline your bottle again to make it look even darker. I like to also outline the bottom of the bottle, not the sand part, but the actual bottom of the bottle. And I also like to shade some black on top of that as well. I am so curious to see what these look like. So I'm going to stop the recording.